catch us up a little bit on what's been happening down in Santa Clara. 49ers reporter for ESPN, Nick Wagoner. Nick, thank you so much for hanging out with us at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. We appreciate you so very much. What were your thoughts on the Warriors-Lakers game last night?
Well, first, Kyle, I'm glad that I can even out the non-Chris numbers for you in that room there. I was just overwhelmed by Chris's when he got on, so now we just even up for the next 2 minutes. But, yeah, about what I expected in the Warriors-Lakers game, but I don't think anybody really wants to hear my opinions. And look, this would be the second time you hear them, so I think you're probably worn out of them also.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. We'll circle back. The 49ers in the NFL draft didn't pick until number 87. They traded up for that spot. It seemed to me like they approached this draft like a team that didn't feel like it needed really a starter at any position. And then Kyle Shanahan even said that they felt kicker was the only spot they needed a starter. I disagree with that. Where did you land it?
Yeah, it's funny you say they didn't pick till number 87, but the good news is it only felt like number 587. That was a good place to start. But yeah, I mean, look, I understand the line of thinking that led them to a kicker with one of those 3 picks in the 3rd round. First of all, because they had them, they had those 3 choices. It is the end of the 3rd round, which ostensibly is the 4th round, if you want to look at it that way, if that makes it a little bit more acceptable to people. The question I have is did they get one of those like generational kickers that's just too good to pass on? And I'm not sure that they did that. And I dove into some of the numbers. I wrote about a piece about it today where it was, if you look at his numbers from 40 and beyond, I think he was, 17 of 27 from 40 to 49 yards and 4 of 10 from 50 to 50 or 50 plus. Other than that. And so he's got a strong leg. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And he delivered in some key moments for them. But is this a guy who's worth like, hey, we're going to take this pick? But I also will say this, and I asked Kyle Shanahan about this the other night because I know how he operates. Kyle Shanahan does not want to spend more than 5 seconds thinking about 3 positions: kicker, punter, and long snapper. And I don't mean 5 seconds each. I mean 5 seconds combined. So I asked him, I said, Kyle, like, knowing that you don't really want to spend time thinking about this, like, how much does that kind of play into your decision to do this? And he basically said yes. And, I don't know if Dr. Dre actually said the line originally. It was in that documentary that came out a few years ago with Jimmy Iovine. And he said something like, you can't put a price on peace of mind. And I think the 49ers felt that way for a while, and then this year they realized, okay, there's a price that we're putting on it where Robbie Gould's price is just too high for us. And so they were always going to spend something significant on kicker. In the past, it's been money, and now it's a draft pick. And the question is, because that's a calculated risk. With money, they knew what they were getting. In this case, they don't. If it works out, no one's going to say anything, at the end of this year if he's kicking game winners in the playoffs. But if he struggles and he's going to have to do it right away, there's going to be a lot of eyes that turn on that pick.
Yeah. Defiant Ones is a great documentary, by the way. That's a great show. Was there any UDFAs, undrafted free agents that caught your attention that the Niners signed?
I have to go with this one, Jack Coletto, which I reported right after that he was one of the first 2 that they had agreed to terms with. Just because he's so fascinating. Like I knew a little bit about him, and then when I found out that he was coming, I looked into his past, and it's like, oh yeah, he started out as a quarterback, and then he played fullback and linebacker and long snapper. I mean, he did like everything at Oregon State. Not like in his past, not just like high school. I was talking about in college, he was doing all those things. So I think there's a really interesting fit there. I know for a fact that he had a lot of significant interest from a lot of teams, like when, during that rush on those undrafted free agents afterwards. And so I don't know that he's necessarily going to be somebody that comes in and contributes anytime soon, but as a long-term potential kind of use check replacement, might be worth something to keep an eye on there.
Talking with Nick Wagoner, 49ers reporter for ESPN. The 49ers this morning, it was reported that they signed quarterback Brandon Allen. That's now the 4th quarterback on their roster. Does this make it any more or less likely that they trade Trey Lance this offseason?
No.
Perfect.
Do you want more? No, it does. I mean, look, here's the situation they're in right now is they needed another arm to get through the offseason. Trey Lance, yes, he's been cleared to do everything, but he is still coming off of an injury. So maybe they kind of ease him in a little bit when they get into the, actual full team OTAs. Sam Darnold still learning the playbook. So I think it's just a matter of getting another arm in there. And look, I don't think that if there was going to be a market for Trey Lance, I think it would have happened before the draft.
Yeah.
You know, when you get past the draft, you're at this point, if you're a team still looking for a starting quarterback, you got much bigger issues.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think that there's going to be a market for him now. Could all of that change in training camp if there's an injury in the preseason or whatever? We're basically having the same conversation that we had about Jimmy Garoppolo last year, right? We're doing that right now with Trey Lance.
Yep.
And so sure, all that could change, and then the money changes after June 1st. It would be a little cheaper in terms of the way they could spread out the dead cap on Trey Lance. So there are other factors that play into this, but I don't think that, Brandon Allen is moving the needle much in terms of that. And what's funny, guys, is unless they can get some sort of an exemption, which I'm not even sure if they're allowed to do, they have rookie minicamp not this weekend, but the following weekend, and they don't have any quarterbacks that are eligible to do it unless our guy Jack Coletto steps up.
Oh, that's great.
What do you think would be what the Niners look for in return for Lance at this point?
I mean, everything I was told was that it was going to take something significant. John Lynch said that on the record when I asked him about it. And my understanding is significant. If you were just looking at the draft, it was going to be, a very early 2 or a 1, which, again, guys, the way I look at this is Trey Lance, again, I hate to keep going to the Jimmy Garoppolo comparison, but he's in a situation that's very similar in that he is more valuable to the 49ers as we sit here right now than he is to any other team in the league, because the 49ers at least have some semblance of an idea of what they have in him. And the fact that he hasn't been healthy, all that did is made other teams say, well, maybe we could get him for nothing. And the 49ers aren't going to give him away for nothing because they gave up so much to get him and because of their own quarterback situation. So if let's say Brock Purdy had never gotten hurt against Philly, whether they win or lose that game, he plays decent in that game, doesn't get hurt, I think there would have been a much bigger conversation to have about how realistic it was they're going to trade Trey Lance. But they also still were going to have to eat money for no reason, and they have proved more than any team in the league that they need not just one quarterback, not just 2 quarterbacks. I feel like LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wagoner, they need a lot of quarterbacks to get through a season.
Talking with Nick Wagoner, he covers the 49ers for ESPN. So San Francisco, they're coming off a second consecutive NFC championship game run. They've been 3 of the last 4. Are we at a point now where I've always been very anti Kyle Shanahan on the hot seat guy. I think he does a phenomenal job, but at some point, they've got to get over that hump. Is this the year where you think if they don't get over that hump, we'll start to hear some kind of rumblings along those lines?
It's an interesting question, Kyle. And actually, it reminds me that I didn't fully answer your question earlier when I went off on the Jake Moody tangent about their drafting. But I think this all ties together, right? It ties into the Trey Lance discussion. It ties into a Brandon Ayuk discussion, because I know there were a lot of people that were positing that the Niners were going to trade Brandon Ayuk to get a pick and reset the contract clock at wide receiver. No. The 49ers are no longer in, we're trying to extend the window. They're in, we're towards the end of this window, and we need to jump through that thing before it closes on us. Yeah. And I think that is the most important thing to know about the way the 49ers are operating right now, where it is a situation. Let's use last year, Mike McGlinchey. They acknowledged that they openly were willing to trade Mike McGlinchey before last season, his final season on his contract. And they probably could have done it. They probably had some offers that were decent, but they didn't do it because they're trying to win a Super Bowl right now. So they're not in the same situation where they were with DeForest Buckner, and they made that move in 2019 thinking hey, we can get Javon Kinlaw in here, and, maybe that'll help us, for 4 or 5 more years of contending at this level. I think right now, guys, if you just ask me, I think they got 2 years. And I think 2 years with this core. Now, that could change, obviously, if guys develop or whatever, but, Trent Williams, close to retirement, Deebo Samuel, his contract will be almost up in a couple of years, and the number goes way up. Some of these other guys, George Kittle, his number goes way up. Fred Warner's numbers go way up. All those things that are going to play into it. And the other thing, guys, is in 2 years, if Brock Purdy is this team's starting quarterback, which is probably a good sign because it means he stayed healthy and played well, and maybe they did jump through that window. But in 2 years, that's when he can first negotiate a contract extension. And and if he does well enough to earn that, that means that they're going to have to pay up, and that will alter the way that they can build their roster. So that's kind of how I think they're looking at it right now is there are some things that they can make work. Maybe they're keeping a couple of guys, even Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. Everyone says they're going to have to come to a decision next offseason. I think maybe they could squeeze one more year out of that. It's mostly true, but I think maybe they could squeeze one more year out of that if they sign Ayuk to an extension that lowers his number. But I think that you're looking at a 2-year window with this core as it's currently constructed.
Last one for me, Nick. You mentioned in 2 weeks these guys are going to be hitting the field. Is there any final tweaks you want to see to the roster before they hit the field?
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen them do more on the offensive line. And their argument would be, last year everyone said the same thing and the line turned out pretty good. My response to that would be, yes, the line turned out pretty good, but it wasn't good enough.
Right.
And it could have been better. And so I think if you're looking at this roster and you're saying, where are the weaknesses? It's nice to say that Colton McKivitz can step in at right tackle and he can beat Jake Brendel. And maybe he does, and good for him if he has a good solid season like Jake Brendel does. But I also want to see Jake Brendel do it again. I want to see Aaron Banks do it again. I want to see better play at right guard. Spencer Burford was okay last year as a rookie at right guard. He wasn't great, which is why he was rotating. So to me, there are still a lot of questions on that offensive line outside of Trent Williams, and that's a big thing when you've got this situation that they do at quarterback.
Nick Wagoner covers the 49ers for ESPN. Nick, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Hey, let's talk some hoop next time.
You got it, guys. Change your name to Chris.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. All right. Nick Wagoner, lots of interesting stuff to dive into there, but I want to talk about that 49ers.